Like so many people, I love taking personality quizzes and finding out more about what type of person I am. Personality quizzes have become such a big part of internet culture, and I personally really enjoy them. Now, that's not to say that I'm running around and taking every BuzzFeed quiz about what kind of bread I am. However, I do like the kind of quizzes that tell me a little bit more about my psyche, how I interact with people, and my personality type. And people have made quite a few lists of book recommendations based on various personality types all over the internet. So I thought it would be fun to grab a couple of book recommendations based on my personality types and read them for a video. So before we jump into the books, let's talk a little bit about the personality types that I'm pulling from. So first is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, also known as 16 personalities. So there are 16 options, and you take an extremely long quiz to figure out which of these options you are. I am an INFP, which is introverted, feeling, intuitive, and perspective. So the description says, these rare personality types tend to be quiet, open-minded, and imaginative, and they apply a caring and creative approach to everything they do. Although they may seem quiet or unassuming, people with the INFP personality type, or mediators, have vibrant, passionate inner lives. Creative and imaginative, they happily lose themselves in daydreams, inventing all sorts of stories and conversations in their mind. INFPs are known for their sensitivity. These personalities can have profound emotional responses to music, art, nature, and the people around them. They are known to be extremely sentimental and nostalgic, often holding on to special keepsakes and memorabilia that brighten their days and fill their heart with joy. So it says that INFPs are idealistic and empathetic, and we're in search for long and soulful relationships. So I resonate with all of those things, and I used to be an ENFP, which is the more extroverted version of INFP. And actually, during the pandemic, I took the MBTI test again and find out that I was an INFP, and I really do think that the isolation and the kind of self-exploration, as opposed to just being around people all the time, kind of changed my personality type, which is pretty interesting. Next up, we're going to talk about the Enneagram. So the Enneagram is also a test that you can take online, and I am an Enneagram 4, which is the individualist. So the description says 4s are self-aware, sensitive, and reserved, but they are emotionally honest and personal, but they also can be moody and self-conscious. So the Enneagram type talks a little bit more about core desires and core fears. So for an Enneagram 4, the basic fear is not to have any identity or personal significance, and the basic desire is to find themselves and their significance and to create an identity. So from my understanding, this personality type really wants to be seen by others and feel like they have a purpose in the world. We can often feel like we're not truly seen by other people and that we are living a different or exceptional life. It also says that 4s are honest with themselves, they own all of their feelings and can look at their motives, contradictions, and emotional conflicts without denying or whitewashing them. 4s are often willing to reveal highly personal and potentially shameful things about themselves because they're determined to understand the truth of their experience, so that they can discover who they are and come to terms with their emotional history. So just like with any personality type, there are aspects of this that I relate to and aspects that I don't, but I do really relate to the aspect of really wanting to be seen and understood and doing my best to bring other people into my emotional life, even if that means that I'm admitting things that I'm not proud of or being really vulnerable in my conversations. And then finally, we'll go into astrology. So obviously this isn't a personality test that you can take, but this is just something that's based on when you were born. And I was born on May 2nd, so I'm a Taurus. So some of the traits that are often brought up for Taurus are generosity, artistic, loyal, honest, hardworking, and then on the flip side, self-indulgent or just concerned with materialistic things. We're practical, reliable, understanding, organized, and consistent. So with a Taurus being an earth sign, we are very grounded and rooted, and we care a lot about physical things, whether that is possessions or the physical body. So I do relate pretty heavily to being a Taurus, but like all of these personality indicators, I think that there are some things that make sense and some things that don't. And I think that you can probably find a little bit of yourself in many of the different signs and different personality types, but I do connect with a lot of the characteristics for each of these personality types. So that being said, let's talk a little bit about the books that I've seen recommended for these personality types. Something I find really interesting is how much crossover there was between between all these personality types and what books were recommended for them. I guess that my personality is consistent across the board because a lot of these books appeared in 2 or 3 of the research lists for each of these personality types. So a lot of people are recommending similar books for all of them. There are also quite a few books throughout these lists that I have already read. So for example, a couple of books that were recommended for INFPs are Bunny by Mona Awad, Crying in H Mart, and The Song of Achilles, all of which I have already read and really enjoyed. So the book I chose that was recommended for the INFP personality type is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. I was really excited to see this on the list because this has been on my shelf on my physical TBR for quite a long time, probably several years, and I think that I picked it up on sale at a local bookstore just because I have heard lots of good things about it and it's been all over the internet. So I think that this is based on the empathetic and emotional life of the INFP because this book is super emotional and deals with family, compassion, tenderness, trauma. So that makes sense for the INFP personality. So we'll see if I like it. Moving on to the Enneagram 4, we have Sweet Bitter by Stephanie Danler. For some reason, this library copy doesn't have like a protective like plastic layer. It's just the sleeve. So that's odd. So part of the blurb says, Stephanie Danler intimately defines the crucial transition from girl to woman, from living in a place that feels like nowhere to living in a place that feels like the center of the universe. She deftly conjures the nonstop and purely adrenalized world of the restaurant, conversations interrupted, phrases overheard, relationships only partially revealed. So it being set in New York is an unintentional relatability point for me, but yeah, this seems like it is playing off of the more individualistic side of the Enneagram 4 and the attempt to understand yourself. So it seems like a book that I will enjoy. I don't know that it's quite a weird woman book, but it is kind of in that vein. So I hope that I really like it. Next up, we have a book that was recommended in both the Taurus category and the Enneagram 4 category, and that is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. So the blurb says, soulful and uproarious, forceful and tender, Untamed is both an intimate memoir and galvanizing wake-up call. It is a story of how one woman learned that a responsible mother is not one who slowly dies for her children, but one who shows them how to fully live. It's the story of navigating divorce, forming a new blended family, and discovering that brokenness or wholeness of a family depends not on its structure, but on the member's ability to bring her full self to the table. So yeah, it's a memoir, which I really like. The topic sounds really interesting. I've seen this book all over the place, but I've never thought to actually pick it up. But since it was recommended for 2 out of the 3 personality types that I was researching for, I figured I had to give it a read. And lastly, I have a book that was specifically recommended to Taurus, and that is The Kamigawa Food Detectives by Hasashi Kashiwai. This is a Japanese translated book. So this is about a restaurant, which is interesting because Sweet Bitter is also about food and restaurants. I'm sensing a bit of a theme here. I think with these personality types, there's a lot of discussion of pleasure and enjoyment and the physical things in life. And I think that food is kind of a big part of that. So I'm not surprised that I see some food themes throughout this list. So this follows a father and daughter who are food detectives, and through their investigations, they're able to recreate dishes from a person's treasured memories, dishes that may well hold the keys to unlocking their forgotten past and future happiness. So it's sort of giving Before the Coffee Gets Cold vibes, or else just kind of a Japanese translated magical realism vibe. And it's really short and it's got a cat on the cover. It's really cute. So I could not pass up the opportunity to give this a read, and I think that I will really like it. That is the book stack for this experiment. And yeah, we're gonna see how I feel about all of these books. So I'm gonna start reading. Okay, I just finished the Kamigawa Food Detectives and I have thoughts. First of all, this book is so cute and so sweet. So I wasn't sure right at the start if I was going to really fall into this book, but as the stories progressed, I really loved this book and I really fell into it. So I can liken it best to Before the Coffee Gets Cold in terms of the setting in a Japanese kind of cafe or diner and the connection between food and memory is kind of apparent in both of those books. So that's the best I can compare it to, but I do think on a broader scale, it is just a very common vibe or common conversation that Japanese literature likes to have. And I think that food is just really important in Japanese culture, and so we get a lot of translations that are really focused on characters' interactions with food and how that kind of connects to other aspects of their lives. So I think I'm gonna give this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really sweet, and I had this kind of nostalgic feeling about it even though I've never read it before. Basically, all of the people who are going to the food detectives are trying to recreate a dish or find a dish that relates to something important that happened in their lives, specifically important people in their lives, sometimes people who have passed away, sometimes people that they're not in contact with anymore. So using food as a means of connection to loved ones is a big theme in this book, and something that I think is really special and an aspect of Japanese literature that I really love. So yeah, I'm gonna give this book 4 stars, and I think that it was a really great recommendation for me. So this book was recommended to me because I'm a Taurus, and I think that I really do see the connection here, because Taurus is pretty well known for being a sign that values those concrete pleasures like food, physical objects, things like that. But I don't think it's just the food connection. I think that there's also the aspect of the depth of feeling that the food evokes. So Tauruses are very stable, but they're also very sentimental and nostalgic. And I think that this book captures both the nostalgia and the idea of enjoyment of those physical pleasures in life, specifically as it relates to food. So I can definitely see this being a good Taurus recommendation, and I personally really liked it as someone who really likes translated literature, especially Japanese literature. And yeah, we're off to a really good start in terms of recommendations. So that is the Kamigawa Food Detectives. Okay, let's talk about Untamed by Glennon Doyle. As you can see, I have quite a few sticky notes kind of sticking out of this book, so just ignore that for now. Oh my gosh, this book surprised me so much in how much I loved it. So if you remember, Untamed was one of the books that was recommended to an Enneagram 4, and the whole time I was reading this book, I was thinking about just how much it reminded me of myself and also the Enneagram 4. Whoever came up with this book recommendation, kudos to you. It was such a perfect recommendation. And what's cool is that as Enneagram 4s, we really want our media to feel like something that is relatable to us or helps us understand ourselves. And so as an Enneagram 4, reading a book recommendation to an Enneagram 4 that just fits that personality type so well just reinforced all of the things that make me a 4. So this book is a memoir, and it discusses so many different topics, and that's an aspect of this book that I think actually is really great, because it is this kind of all-encompassing, broad, expansive look at Glennon Doyle's life, but also the collective experience of womanhood and humanity. And this way of writing and this expansiveness is something that I really would love to be able to write, and have thought about a lot of how I want to basically write a manifesto about my life, or write about the experience of womanhood and being part of this collective experience. And I've not been able to do it, and our girl Glennon did it. So in this book, she covers themes of identity and womanhood, relationships, family dynamics, parenthood, her relationship with religion, body image issues, mental health. It's just, there's so many different things covered, but her voice is just truly magnetic to listen to. And I don't think I've ever felt more connected personally to the experiences in a memoir than with this book. Now, there are so many memoirs that I absolutely love and connected with in one way or another, but a lot of the things that she talks about in this book I related to heavily and can see myself, struggling with in the future, for example, with parenthood. but a lot of just her experiences in womanhood and the way that she thinks about the world and thinks about herself and processes things and how emotional she is. I related so heavily to all of those things. So throughout the book, Glennon talks a lot about understanding herself and then also having other people understand her and wanting to create this meaning in her life. That kind of becomes the thesis or the driving point behind the story, which is exactly what drives the Enneagram 4 as well. And ultimately, it's just a story about Glennon doing her best and discovering herself and what she wants her life to look like, and following that journey despite what other people think and what reservations she herself has. She wants to be untamed, and she wants to go about her life in such a way that is free and liberated, and I really, really admire that. So I want to read you a passage that really exemplifies how this relates to the Enneagram 4. So it says, "As I practiced allowing my hard feelings to come and stay as long as they needed to, I got to know myself. The reward for enduring hard feelings was finding my potential, my purpose, and my people. I'm so grateful. I can't imagine a greater tragedy than remaining forever unknown to myself. That would be the ultimate self-abandonment. So I have become unafraid of my own feelings. Now when hard feelings ring the bell, I put on my big girl pants and answer the door." Mic drop. So in terms of how I feel about this as a recommendation for Enneagram 4, as I said, I think that this is an incredible recommendation, and I think I've seen this around quite a bit and resisted it because it kind of gave off a self-helpy kind of vibe, or that it was going to be a little bit buzzwordy. And I'm really, really glad that I gave it a shot for this video and that I saw it on the recommended list, because I feel so connected to this and I want to get my own copy and annotate it now, because I think that there is so much that is relatable and also so much to learn from her story and the way that she processes things. And yeah, I think that this is an incredible recommendation for me personally and for anybody who's an Enneagram 4. I actually have a friend who's an Enneagram 4 who I want to pass this book along to because I think she would really love it. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic recommendation and I'm giving it 5 stars. So that is Untamed. Okay, so I have finished Sweet Bitter by Stephanie Danler, and I have a few thoughts. I think the best comparison that I can make to this book is the show The Bear, just with the pure chaos and insanity of the restaurant space and the way that the relationships develop. It feels very reminiscent of some aspects of The Bear, but it doesn't have like the family dynamics, just really like the part that's set in the restaurant, if that makes sense. This book follows Tess, who moves from Ohio to New York. She doesn't really have a plan for when she moves, but she ends up applying to this really well-known restaurant and gets the job as a back waiter. And she is essentially thrust into this environment that is full of drinking, drugs, chaos of the restaurant, long hours. The people there are like almost hazing her at the beginning of this book, and she's just sort of trying to figure out how to do the job, like the actual job requirements, but then also how to be the kind of person that fits in with that culture. I would consider her a little bit of an unlikable narrator just because she's making some poor decisions, and we can kind of see that on the outside, but she's trying so hard to fit into this culture that she is changing before our eyes. She's becoming someone who is completely different than who she was at the start. I think she's someone whose identity is really based on the type of people she's around. She doesn't really have a lot of core identity principles or morals or things that she really holds dear or finds meaning in just in and of herself. I think that she really, is a product of her environment and the people that she's around, and we see that happen as she develops relationships with different characters at the restaurant, that she starts to take on aspects of them, and in order to, quote unquote, find herself, she's sort of losing herself in the process. So overall, I did enjoy this book. I thought that the food descriptions were really interesting. The characters of Simone and Jake were interesting in their relationship. Frustrating at times for sure, but I did feel empathy for our main character, and I liked the exploration of friendships and relationships in this environment. And since it is kind of such a high pressure situation, like over a period of time it continues to be high pressure, it puts the characters into situations that I think add a lot of growth and value to the story. And I think that that was really fun and interesting to read. I am between 3 and 4 stars for this one. I may go ahead and just put it at 4 stars because I did really have fun reading it and I got really caught up in the narrative, but I did get a little bit bogged down by the fact that this character seems to lack a little bit of agency. She just sort of gets swept along in everything that's going on, and I found her a little bit insufferable at times, which is funny because this book was recommended for the Enneagram 4, and I've seen a lot of media that talks about how insufferable Enneagram 4s can be. I think that whoever recommended this book for that Enneagram is thinking about the ways in which Enneagram 4s can be a bit insufferable and a bit self-obsessed, or we can wallow a little bit if we allow ourselves. That in combination with this main character's desire to be part of something bigger and desire to fit in or to be understood, to understand herself. I think that those things relate back to the Enneagram 4 as well, but I think that this definitely relates more to the more negative side of the Enneagram. She does make poor decisions, and I think that she is a bit insufferable, but ultimately I do understand the point being she's a young person who is trying to figure herself out, and she moves to the big city to do that. She gets swept away in this restaurant, in this, you know, high pace, high pressure, crazy environment, and she just loves it, and she is finding meaning in that. So I think that like it is a quintessential coming of age story in that way, but I think that she does have some toxic patterns. So overall, I did like this book. I would not say that it was a new favorite. It's definitely my least favorite so far out of the 3 books that I've read for this video. And I do think that it is a fair recommendation for Enneagram 4s. So that's Sweet Bitter. Okay, so let's talk about On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. So this was the book that was recommended for the personality type INFP in the MBTI personality types. So before I jump into how I felt about this book, I just want to say that I do understand why this was recommended for the INFP, with INFPs being known to be altruistic and very emotional and sensitive. It makes sense to me why they would recommend a book that was very emotional and very lyrical and written very beautifully, because I think that that really does fit how INFPs tend to think and experience the world. Hi. You done? I do really appreciate the skill with which Ocean Vuong writes. I think that he is a master of crafting imagery and poetic language. He's a renowned poet, and I think that some of the passages in this book almost would have made better poems than like parts of a novel. And the story was told in a lot of vignettes and through very carefully crafted poetic language, to the point that I think it actually hindered my connection with it. It was so poetic and lyrical that I almost felt like I was floating above the story, not ever being able to actually dig into it and connect to it deeply. There was never a moment where I felt like I was fully grasping the story of it. And I think maybe it's just where I'm at right now in my reading life, that this is not the kind of book or the type of writing that I feel really drawn to right now. It almost felt like something that I would have read in college, something more academic where I am close reading this, almost as if I should have been studying this as if it was lines of poetry. But in terms of how I felt about it as a novel, I just could not dig into it. Okay, my battery died, but we're back. I guess I feel a little bit disappointed that I could not dig into this, and also a little bit bad or like embarrassed that I'm giving it a lower rating. I think that I'm gonna give this book 2 stars purely from an academic standpoint, and a standpoint of appreciating the language and appreciating the effort and the masterful usage of language. I think that those things bring a lot of merit to this book, and I want to acknowledge that in my rating. But there also wasn't much that I personally connected with, and I could not get invested in this book or the characters. And that's really sad, because when a book is so emotional and so beautifully written, I think I should be able to connect with it, right? But I just did not feel that way with this book. So like I said, I think that it's a fair recommendation for INFPs, but I just don't know that it was the best recommendation for this INFP specifically. And like I said, that just may be where I'm at in life with my reading, but it was just not a favorite, and yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a 2 star. So that concludes all the books that I planned on reading for this video based on my personality type. So I want to give some final thoughts. Overall, I think that these recommendations were spot on. I think particularly for my Enneagram, I really found those books to be relatable or just really interesting to read, and I felt drawn to them. My favorite book from this whole experiment was Untamed. I loved it. I connected with it so deeply, and I think that it's gonna be a favorite for a long time to come. I've already recommended it to multiple people. I'm annotating it. It just became a new favorite. So I'm really, really glad that it was recommended to me, and I think that that is a perfect recommendation for the Enneagram 4. The Kamigawa Food Detectives, which was recommended for my zodiac sign, was also really great and really cute. I loved that one. It wasn't an instant favorite, but it is one that I think I will remember, and I did really have fun reading it. Sweet Bitter was also really fun. I enjoyed it, even though the main character was pretty insufferable, but I just couldn't look away, and so I had a lot of fun reading it, even though I do have some things that I disliked about the character. And with On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, I think that this one was a little bit of a miss, but I can appreciate why it was recommended for that personality type. Overall, this was a super fun video to make, and I feel like it is so fun to look at personality tests and kind of get recommendations from that. I just think that it feels really nice to get personalized recommendations in that way and feel connected. So I really, really enjoyed making this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.